I totally hit that button. Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining for a hopefully exciting stream. We have a couple of cool things planned for today. Been thinking about this week what we want to cover, but as always, the point of this exercise is to be live with you. So, hey, hi, Auntie. And therefore, if you have comments, if you have questions, I'm trying my best to be able to look at what I'm doing on the screen and also look at you in the chat. That's a skill apparently that one has to learn, but I'm working on it. And I would love to be derailed by an interesting question or some interesting research to be done on deceased people, no living people. So I have a couple of things today, but I thought I would start with something that is in line with that, which is Auntie, who is on the chat. Hi, Auntie is one of my Hammond aunts and is therefore also descended from the good folks on the tree that we've been researching, this here Hammond tree. And she reports from one of my Hammond cousins. If I recall correctly, I have 8 Hammond cousins, and 6 of them, I think, are still living. But one of our intrepid Hammond cousins sent a question, who is a lot of the Hammonds in my aunt's generation and my generation are musicians of some kind. Harry Harvard Hammond there was very musical, would welcome for Pam to share memories in the chat if you want about that. It was a great inspiration to a lot of my cousins. And so one of our cousins who is also a musician sent the question, hey, there's this guy. I assume it's somebody that he's heard of or knows through the industry or is at least familiar with, but the guy happens to have a Wikipedia page who is a known record producer whose name is John Hammond. And he said, are we related to this guy? And my original answer was, I don't know. And my second answer was, hey, I could go poke around in the guy's Wikipedia and see if it says anything about his ancestors, which it does. And then I hit a dead end with that, and I said, oh, I'll go to Ancestry and look them up. And then I said, I will wait until Sunday to go to Ancestry and look them up, because let's do that together. So let's see, how am I going to try to answer the question? And so we have a banner moment on the stream I'm very excited about, which is we're going to go do some research that I don't already think I know the answer to. And so I have no idea what we're going to find or if we're going to hit a dead end. But let's go see what tools we have available with our free trial Ancestry membership to find out whether this guy, and fortunately for my rules, he is deceased. He has passed away as well, so I don't have to worry about having a living person on the stream. But here's this guy, John Hammond, a record producer, father of famous blues musician John P. Hammond. This guy. And then we have, oh, he's not deceased. Well, but he's on Wikipedia. This is publicly available information. We're going to call it good. And he is the son of John H. Hammond, also known as John Henry Hammond. And I will tell you that off the top of my head, wait a minute. Yeah, okay. Oh, father of famous people. John P. Hammond is the guy we got asked about. This is the father. Now we're going to try to work our way back up. Parents here. He is the son of John Henry Hammond I, who does not have a Wikipedia page, and Emily Vanderbilt Sloan, yes, of the famous Vanderbilt family. So I will say this about that. As far as I know, I don't know that my Hammonds have any connection to this family, but so in the course of my research, I hadn't found a branch that goes to here, but I don't trace all the sibling branches down. So can't rule it out. I see here that we have an uncle, so this takes us back another generation on a Hammond line. U.S. Ambassador to Spain. All right, we fancy. Ogden Haggerty Hammond. Notice how, if you've watched any previous streams, you'll see that there are some recurring names in my Hammond family, and these aren't them, but we do have an inordinate fondness for names that start with H, and we're rocking that. We also have, okay, was born in Louisville, Kentucky. So this is about as far back as we've been able to get, is we had, okay, so if that musician John Henry Hammond is his nephew, right? And so that John Henry Hammond is the guy's father. So then if we go to his uncle, then this John Hammond, yes, brother John Henry Hammond Jr., son of John Henry. So John Henry Hammond and Sophia Vernon Wolfe are the farthest back that we have gotten. and they don't appear to have Wikipedia pages. So at this point, I figure we can jump over to, oh, we're not filling up the hole. We can hop over to Ancestry. And actually, why don't we just start with simple old Google? What I typically do when I'm looking up a new family is I'll just go Google the two spouses' names together, which often works. If they are both very, very common names, it falls apart pretty quickly. But oftentimes, there we go. Okay. Oftentimes we have, oh, look at that. So we've got stuff in the world of Find a Grave. That was actually the first thing we did in our very first stream. We also have this site called The Peerage. So that's kind of interesting. Let's take a look at that. And we have WikiTree, which is, oh, so that might be kind of cool. We may bounce over to WikiTree. Okay. John Henry Hammond Jr., Peerage of Britain, Royal Families of Europe. Well, we fancy. All right, John Hay. So here's some of these same people that we've been looking for, right? This is the guy who's the son of Emily Vanderbilt Sloan, but we are looking for up the Hammond line to see if they're connected to our Hammonds. So here's General John Henry Hammond, who married Sophia Vernon Wolfe, and this site is pulling their information from the same place we've just been. They've been on Wikipedia as well, so they don't know who his parents are either. This is just stuff you can get from Wikipedia. Okay, so this site doesn't have anything. But what do we have on Find a Grave? And this is one of the sons, right? So we're getting that as his parents' names. And we have here. That's one of the John Henry Hammonds. Ah, this is the one who married Emily Vanderbilt Sloan. Same deal. They have created a lot of Hammond children that we don't know if they're related. This guy, born in Manhattan and died in Minnesota. Okay, sure. Civil War Union. Good for them. Okay. We still are not getting anything on who his parents might have been. So Find a Grave doesn't know who his parents might be. And so as I'm glancing over the record, what I'm looking for is, was he born in a location that has any resemblance to a location that we have in my Hammond tree, right? Is there any overlap in location? We had Hammonds in Buffalo, and those Hammonds came from Pennsylvania, specifically Western Pennsylvania, and then before that, Vermont, and before that, Rochester, Massachusetts. So I don't have in my Hammond line a particular connection to Manhattan. But of course, I can't rule out that an earlier generation from Rochester may very well have moved to New York City. That absolutely could have happened. So we'll look at there. But I'm looking for, were they born in an area that overlaps with my family? So far, no. Did they die in an area that overlaps with my family? No, I don't have anybody in St. Paul, Minnesota as of yet. So there's nothing that connects with the Hammonds that are in my tree yet. The other thing that I'm then scrolling down and looking at on Find a Grave is what's in the bio. There isn't always a bio. And when there is, you can't just necessarily take it at face value because it will be entered by people who may have made errors, but fine. And, oh, Cranky, I see your question. No, I meant actually Wikipedia. I was still in Wikipedia at that point, just seeing if if Wikipedia is going to give us the family tree for free, which it did not. We haven't gone to WikiTree yet. We are going to go do that and see what we get. So one other thing, so oftentimes in the bio, especially with more recently passed people, you can sometimes get a complete transcript of their obituary in there. It's whatever people have chosen to type in. And then if it points to a source that you can go verify, like an obituary, and you can go see what was printed, then you get a lot of really good data. Sometimes it will say a bunch of stuff that seems like this person might know, but we don't know how they knew. And that means that it's a pretty good lead, but it's not proof by itself. And I'm going to go look for how did they know those things, and then how am I going to verify those and prove them. So we also have, then if we look down here in the connections of family members, these are all individuals who have profiles in Find a Grave, which generally means they have to have a burial site that can be, that at least can be listed. Sometimes those are in defunct cemeteries, So it may not still be an existing or visitable burial site, but Find a Grave asks you that there has been one and that you know where it is. And so if it exists and it's been entered into Find a Grave and people have linked it together to indicate that they are related, using the features in Find a Grave, then you will find this stuff down in the center, a list of their spouses, their children, and if their parents are known, you'll get parents and any siblings also listed in this section. So when I'm doing my quick glance, I get to this page and I say, is there anything here that tells me this guy is related to my line? I'm looking down here to say, are there parents? No parents listed. We don't know who his parents were. Are there overlaps in the locations? Nothing. And so right now I don't have enough information. We're going to keep looking. Now, another thing that you can do on Find a Grave that's pretty neat is that I can actually go and say, let's find more Hammonds listed in this specific cemetery or in this city. I would do that if I had reason to think that his parents might be buried in the same cemetery as him, and maybe they are in the cemetery record, but the links haven't been made. At this point, I'm thinking since this is someone who's migrating west, I don't have any reason to believe that his parents are in this cemetery. I'm going to wait on that. I can come back and look later, of course. So let's go back to our results for John Henry and Sophia Vernon Wolfe. Remembering that's the furthest back generation that we have for this Wikipedia person that we're looking at. And what we found when we came down here is that we have, okay, see, there's some other people's family trees that we'll be able to look. There's, oh, he's on Family Search. So we'll be able to look at a lot of free sites before we go over and try to see what Ancestry has. But WikiTree, this is a great time to introduce what we might be able to learn on WikiTree. WikiTree is awesome. It is a completely free site that is attempting through all of our shared contributions to build a single connected family tree for the world, except mostly the American and Western European world at the moment. But I will, not exclusively, but primarily. So if we go here, we have pros and cons of WikiTree. WikiTree is not the ideal place to go to find records and sources, but oftentimes you get a part of the population on WikiTree that are really, really working hard to make sure that everybody is not just listed, but also has the sources and documentation. And so you can see this is actually a pretty good example of that. Sophia Vernon Wolfe Hammond's records here indicate somebody did a bunch of the same kinds of lookups that we've done for Henry Hammond, and they have listed here all the census records that they found her in, and some what looked to me like some death records and an obituary. And they did it kind of the way I do it when I set up profiles on WikiTree, which is these are all just kind of pointers. It would be super cool if they were links that you can click through. It looks to me like that this came from Ancestry, because that's the format when you bring over a record from Ancestry. And if you could make it a clickable link, it would take us to that page. But since Ancestries are behind a paywall, they're putting them here and just giving you enough information like the image number, the film number, the image number, the page. So we could hop over to a free site like Family Search that also has the census records all available. We could go dig through and find these if we wanted to. I do not currently want to, but if I did. And since I have a newspapers.com subscription in my regular work, I could go look at the Indianapolis Star on this date and get her obituary. Likely that would tell me who, no, there's a good chance it would tell me who her parents are, but I don't know. Autobiography of General John H. Hammond. Nice. So and then there's this one, which seems to be a record that's held by a family member. Yep, because it says in the collection of Samuel Reckford, who is a person whose profile is on WikiTree. So, great. So we have a lead here. Again, the Wolfe family is not what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is the Hammond family. So what do we got? We've got somebody has entered his parents. Hey, that's cool. Okay, so here on WikiTree, somebody has entered a fair amount of information about this John Henry Hammond, including a link to that Find a Grave that we were just at. and some other data here, some census records. It's frustrating that the autobiography is only mentioned here and not quoted from. But since we can connect, we could actually send a message to this guy who, for all we know, may be a cousin, and ask, hey, can you share information out of this autobiography? And they may very well do it. But now what we have is we now know who his father was, who is this Henry Hammond. And it looks to me like we've hit another brick wall. The infamous, in genealogy, we use the phrase brick wall when we hit a place that we can't research past. So we've got a general person named Henry Hammond, born in Maryland. That is also not near where any of my Hammonds were from. And then he's husband of Rachel Orr. Do we know anything about her? And she is a more recent immigrant from Ireland, according to her son's memoirs. And then, yeah, see, notice how, if I look here on WikiTree, the profile manager for Rachel Orr's profile is this same guy, Samuel Reckford. So we can assume that he's going to be a descendant of this family, and that, remember, he's got the written notes that were from John Henry Hammond himself. So according to her son's memoirs, she was born in Ireland, lived in New York City, and moved to Kentucky, and then perhaps to Ohio. Okay. None of those locations overlap at all with the Hammond family that we've been researching together. So we've got, let's see, how far back? We haven't yet taken our Hammond family all the way. Oh no, we found Hammonds in Rochester, and we haven't figured out how they're connected yet. So it is possible that we're going to find that we have some, but like so far we've just struck out on all of these locations. And in particular, I tend to make an assumption that if we think about the European migration patterns, the waves of Europeans who came to New England were largely distinct from the Europeans who went to New York and New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Those were typically sort of separate groups of Europeans, and they did not often cross. If you went to New England, you tended to not only stay in New England, but also to follow a particular migration pattern to the west. If you came in through New York and or Pennsylvania, there tended to be a little bit of a different pattern. And if you came in through Maryland or any place south, Maryland, Virginia was an entry point that the people who went to New England and the people who went to Maryland and Virginia tended to not be connected to each other or not be close to each other in what I've found in most of my research, which is admittedly a pretty narrow slice. So when I see that this Henry Hammond was born in Maryland, that suggests to me that he is likely from a family of Hammonds who migrated to Virginia, the Virginia-Maryland area directly from England. And that if we are connected, it is further back in England than what we can show through records, because we're going to find that my Hammonds came in through New England. And so it was not common for the same family to send some of their kids to Virginia and some of them to New England. They would have tended to go together. So that's my inclination so far, is that I don't think this Hammond is related to our Hammonds. And I think what we'll do is, because I'm remembering, we haven't actually on this show gone back through all the Hammond connections on my tree. So we can go back and kind of look at why do I think my Hammonds are from New England and see if we can get back there. Yeah, what's interesting, Auntie, is that if you do your DNA, we haven't talked about DNA yet, and I haven't figured out quite how we're going to cover DNA on the stream, but if you do your DNA with any of the services, really, but Ancestry is actually pretty good about the way that they talk about the migration patterns in not just in history, but also in your DNA, because it will show where you have connections from. I'll try to figure out for a future stream if I can show, if it makes sense to show mine, or maybe one of our intrepid viewers. But you can get a connection to you. If you watch this stuff on TV, you'll see the ones where they come out with the pie chart and they say that you're, this much Swedish and this much Irish and this much English and this much Native American or whatever. This much you're not Native American, but we're not. And it will talk about where in outside of North America your DNA matches with people who live in various parts of the world. What Ancestry will also do is that they will show you, they have these little dotted lines on the map in North America where they will show that you've come over from Europe and you've arrived in North America, and there will be communities, historical communities in various parts of North America that you may also share DNA with descendants who are connected to those communities. So less so for us, but for a friend that we researched, there was one that was like the Swedish immigrants to Pennsylvania and Delaware was a distinct migration group that has some shared DNA, and you can see that this person has a connection with that migration group in that period in history. So you can actually really build some interesting historical timelines. And the thing I said about migration patterns is not something that I know from reading history. It's something that I have observed from researching our trees and a lot of other people's trees, is that there doesn't seem to be, if I see somebody whose family goes back to Maryland and Virginia, I can almost always say, I'm not going to even bother to look in New England for these people because they won't be the same family. There are a couple of exceptions where some New Englanders moved to Long Island and to New Jersey, though not typically New York City, what we now call New York City. And some of it had to do with them being members of particular churches as well, right? You may have heard that the Quaker church was really big in was very dominant in Pennsylvania, where other kinds of Puritan Protestants were dominant in Massachusetts. And so they tended not to migrate to each other because they would go likely with a church group or a group of neighbors, even if they did move west. So, and there are some interesting patterns of, like, there is a period of time where you can tell that the white people in New England got tired of living near all the white people in New England. And they said, hey, there's some land up in Vermont and New Hampshire that doesn't have very many white people in it. Let's go there and take that. And then let's go west to New York. And you can just kind of see where this part of Vermont started to get too crowded and the big families didn't have land to give down to their younger children. And they're like, fine, I'll go migrate over here. Or land grants as a result of military service would also be like encouraging people to move west and take over more land. So, yeah. So at this point, we've gotten back about as far as it's going to be easy to get on the line of John Hammond, the musician. His Hammonds appear to go back to a Hammond who was born in Maryland, therefore was likely from a family that migrated to the Virginia, Maryland area. May have also come over a lot later than the Puritan migrants to New England were in the 1600s. We're still in the 1800s here. This could be folks who came over a lot later. That's actually difficult because in that 1700s time period is often not well documented. So that may be difficult to research, but we could come back here and do some digging and figure out what happened to this. And it's interesting because the individual who put this in, it looks like these names just came straight out of the guy's memoirs. And so we don't know in this case, are there any records that connect back to this family? Are there any surviving records? I have said on the stream before, I joke about New York being a place that genealogy goes to die. That's actually much less true now than it was a few years ago. But oh my goodness, Maryland is really, really difficult because there aren't reliable church records the way there were in early New England. And the civil records were very not well kept. You get into some of those parts of the South and you actually have like the courthouse fires and burned during the Civil War and records were lost. And there just seems to be a lot more gaps in there. Also in Maryland and Virginia, you rely a lot more on land records and deeds and other kinds of court records that are not yet as many online. You would actually have to go to a courthouse if the record exists and read it in its script and transcribe it yourself, which a lot of awesome researchers do. It's just a different type of work from what you can knock out easily online. So I look at Maryland and I have, fear in my heart also, thinking that person might be difficult to research in that location at that time. So, but we've gotten him back to this point, and let's hop on back to the tree, and we've got a couple of things that I had in mind for looking at how might we continue to build out our tree for Henry Hammond here, or sorry, for Harry Harvard Hammond. The last time we looked at the tree, I foreshadowed, right, I teased that we were going to talk about the glorious Iowa cemetery visit that allowed us to make the link from our Honeywell Hammond back to earlier records. So in the last stream when we talked about the Hammonds, we did a survey of all the people named Honeywell. And it turns out that I think we have now settled on that there were at least 4 individuals who were named not just Hammond, but Honeywell Hammond, or 3 Honeywell Hammonds and a Honeywell Haskell, or something along those lines. So we found several of them, most of whom could not have been my ancestor, but one of whom was a maybe, because we looked in one of the Free Hammond books, and it said that there was a Honeywell whose family had moved to Ohio. We have this Honeywell living in a place called Salisbury, Pennsylvania, which is near the Ohio border. So we can't rule out that maybe that Ohio guy is the same as this guy, although there were a number of inconsistencies where it didn't seem like that was him. And we have run into the easy census research brick wall, or pit of despair, where, although we have Honeywell listed in the 1850 census by name, and we know for various reasons that this is him with his children, we do not have any record of Honeywell Hammond in a census with his parents, because prior to 1850, the census didn't list the names of every member of the household, only the head of household. Which means, so we have him as the head of a household in 1840. In 1830, he was probably about 23 years old, and it is possible that he was married and had set up a household by then. But it's also possible that he was still living as a child in his parents or another household. And yes, and so we don't have him listed by name we haven't found him in 1830 by name. Now, we know that he used, sometimes people threw their hands up at that difficulty of spelling his first name and just listed him as H. Hammond. So we might find an H. Hammond in the census, and it might be difficult to know whether that's him or not. One of the things that we knew, we don't have all of his children listed, but something that I look for to see, do we think this guy has set up a household of his own in 1830, is if he has children who were already born by then or who were born around that time. If he doesn't, then, because we don't know yet when he married Emily Shumway. We don't have his marriage date. And I don't think we had that from the Shumway book. I will quickly go look for, well, heck, I didn't link the Shumway book to Emily's profile, nor to his. What am I doing? I didn't link the Shumway book? We know I linked it somewhere. Anyway, I wanted to go just take a quick look at the Shumway book and see. Well, I am terrible. I should have put it up. There it is. It's here. I should have put it everywhere. Okay, so here's the Shumway book that we got those facts out of to begin with. Let's go make sure it's linked to see how much I wish I had linked it to everybody. Shumway book. There, and it's just that simple. Like, okay, I'm still going to have to go back and figure out what page he was on. And so it might be even better. You can get, with archive.org, you can get the link to actually have the page number in it. And then that could be a link that takes us directly to the page that this guy is on. But for the moment, because I just want to fill it out quick because I can't believe I didn't do it before, I'm just going to give it a link to the book is better than nothing. And so now at least I have it, because we know I'm going to go wander off and research the Hammonds for a while and come back. And I might even forget that a Shumway book existed. So I want to make sure that it's linked to everybody who is in it. Here, Shumway book. Again, it's a pointer. I can actually come back and edit this link. So I can, once I figure out what the page number is, I can actually go add the page number to this if I want to. Well, heck, let's just go figure out how to do that. And then we're in here somewhere. Just going to try to find my way to the pages that we were on. Yeah. 2000 and something. Yep, good. We're in Descendants of John Shumway, which is where we want to be. Oh, there we are. There's Anson, who is our father of Emily, and there's Emily. Why are we here? The reason we're here is to say, do we have, oh, we sure do, and I missed it. Did we have the marriage date? Yes, we have the marriage date. It's right here. I just didn't add it. So here's Emily. Let's plug that in. Hey, good morning, Ben. Morning, people. Thanks for joining. All right, so we are looking for, what I wanted to figure out is to know whether I'm likely to find Honeywell Hammond listed as the head of a household in the 1830 census. It is more likely that I'm going to find that to be true if he was married by then. Oh, thanks, Ben. I appreciate the support. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing the information about the stream. Do obviously please tell your friends if you think folks would be interested. If you're new, we're currently studying through my family. Part of the reason for that is that I can go show you a lot of the techniques that I have used to build my tree over the years. But the intention is, as we get more visitors in and more folks are watching, I would love to help you solve some of your genealogy questions. We did a little bit of a search just this morning on a question from a cousin where we're trying to figure out if some Hammonds are related to some other Hammonds. And now what we're trying to do is kind of shore up, what do we know about my Hammonds, and can we be sure that my Hammonds are not connected to the Hammond that my cousin asked about? So to know whether my Honeywell Hammond is listed in the 1830 census, I'm looking for, if he was married by then, there's a slightly higher chance that he might be listed in the census because he may have gotten married and set up his household. He might also have gotten married and they moved back in with parents until he could afford to do that. So we don't know because it's a better chance. But now that we know he was not married in 1830, because they got married in 1833, I'm even thinking it's even more likely that Honeywell Hammond was probably living at home until he got married. That would have been, for that time period, that would have been a common situation. So I am pasting in, it says here in the book, so it says here that Emily was born in Vermont. Honeywell, it says, is of New Hartford, Iowa. It doesn't say they got married in New Hartford, Iowa in 1833. And I don't think they would have, because I don't think Europeans were really settling Iowa at that time. So there may have been a few, but I don't think there was widespread settling in there. That's where it helps to start to know these kinds of migration patterns, to say, very unlikely that they would have been in Iowa in 1833. But so we don't know where they got married. They may have married in Vermont. They may have married in that part of Pennsylvania that we found them in 1840. So we just don't know where it happened. And then to say, how do we know this? We're going to put the Shumway book, because we don't have a record that says this yet. So I'm just putting this to remind myself, where did I get this date from? You will notice even between streams that I throw things in here and then I don't remember where they came from. So having just that pointer to say, now I've got, and then, hey, I've got the link to the Shumway book here. I could go one more thing. Remember that we said I can put the page number. This is different for every website. So I happen to know that this is how archive.org works, is if you read through here, the web address is actually somewhat readable. And this piece is the link to this specific book. And then it says page, and then that's the page. And then the stuff at the end you can kind of ignore. This is just If I take this off, the link still works. And it's just saying whether it's 1 page or 2 page, and it doesn't matter. So now I know that if I take this part of the web address and just say page 343 and paste it in over here, that's going to be when I go to open that link. Oh, come on, Ancestry. That's good, though. It gives me a chance to take a drink. Man, y'all, I learned. So when I watch other people streaming on Twitch, and as you know, most of them are gamers, a lot of them have things like automatic timed reminders to drink water. And I tell you what, last week I learned why that is. Because I went that whole 2 hours and I swear I didn't take a drink, and then I was really, really sorry. So feel free to pester me to drink water. I'll try to remember to do that whenever Ancestry gives me that spinny thing. I'll be like, yes, time to take a drink. Okay, so now we're saying Shumway book page 343, and that link will take us directly there, which is even more helpful than what we had before. And I can now go to Honeywell, and we'll go ahead and put the same thing there because he's named in that book on that page. Shumway book, page 343. Simple as that. There are other fancier ways to add sources on Ancestry, and I found them too complicated, and I tended not to do them because they took too much time. So, and if you've seen how fussy I get with all the little records, and if I find something to be a pain and too complicated to do, like, you probably will really find it too complicated. As you start to go through and do this work in volume, and you have a lot of people looking for those things that are sort of labor saving and that make it quicker and easier, it makes it, for me, more likely that you're going to do it. And so I'm looking for what are the ways that I'm going to do and not forget, because we just watched that I skipped over adding the Shumway link to all those people. And I could have gone in and added it to however many siblings and so forth. But at least now I have all the direct ancestors in my tree who are surnamed Shumway. I could go back and look at like all the spouses of all the Shumways and so forth. So, yep. So now we have their marriage date. And this leads me to suspect that I probably am not going to find any joy trying to locate Honeywell Hammond in the 1830 census. I might if I come across it, but I'm not going to go break my back trying to find it because I suspect it's not likely to be there. The other thing that we did last week, so with respect to this gulf of before 1850, people are not listed by name. And this makes it very difficult to use that census trick to link them to their parents. We learned with Emily Shumway that when a family history book exists, and those were written in the 1800s and the early 1900s, that we were able to use in the case of the Shumways, the existence of the book and the family tree that was described in that book got us over that gap. It got us further back in her family in ways that the census didn't. Or, we found it so early that we didn't even need to look in the census, but we got over that period where it gets us all the way back to Shumways that were documented in records in colonial New England where records were kept really well. So this is going to allow us to build out a lot about her family. We found the Hammond books, which there are 2 of, didn't have my Honeywell Hammond in them as far as we can tell, except for maybe that Ohio guy, which means we did not get free lineage for Honeywell. We are pretty sure that he is connected to that family because of the prevalence of the name Honeywell and the fact that we actually have a pretty good idea of which branch of that family he's from because it is the maiden name of someone who married a particular descendant of that Hammond family. And then from that family onward, her maiden name was used as a tribute to her and her father as a given name for some of their children, which is a thing that happened in a lot of families at that time. Made it kind of helpful to try to trace back their ancestry using this name. But we haven't figured out yet how my Honeywell is connected to that family. We think he surely must be, but we don't know how. So this is where, when I left us at the end of the stream last time, I talked about, I teased a little bit about how my auntie, who is on stream today, and is awesome, helped us solve this problem. And I'm going to start with the guy that we researched a fair bit early on in the stream, who is my great grandfather, Eugene Hammond. And so this guy, just as to bring us all up to speed, he was born in 1855 in Pennsylvania. We first find him with his family in the 1860 census, which is exactly what you would expect. And he's originally by this point, they have relocated to Iowa. So you'll recall his parents lived in Pennsylvania for a while, which is where he was born. But by the time he shows up in a census, they have migrated west to Iowa. And they've set up business, they've set up their shop there as farmers. And so he lives in Iowa. He marries Ella Wilcox. And then they have, we find in the 1880 census, we find them living with their 3 children and his parents, Honeywell and Emily. Their 3 children, Irving, Cora, and Charlie. But then, by the time we get to the 1885 Iowa State Census, we see a sad thing, which is that Eugene here, listed as EA, and his wife Ella are only listed with 1 child, Irving. And we found that the reason for that was that Cora and Charlie had both died at a very young age. Cora was 6 and Charlie was 4. And they are both buried here in a cemetery in Iowa. And the Hammond family at that time was living in Butler County, Iowa. Let's go map that. Butler County, Iowa. We'll take a look at where that is. It's pretty rural, right? It's a big old county. And we know that they are connected to an area called New Hartford. We can zoom in on that, right? And also Beaver Township. So it's a pretty small town, right? It's in this is the area that we're in. I love how when you go and Google these locations, you get street view pictures and you can really get a feel for, here's what it looks like today. So even today, oh yeah, see, New Hartford, population 516. Right. Now, it's not super far away from Cedar Falls, which is a good size. Waterloo, Cedar Falls are good sized cities. And it's not super far from, okay, so Ames is down there. I've been to some of these places. I haven't been to New Hartford, but I've been to Ames and I've been through Cedar Rapids and there's Des Moines. So it's kind of out there, right? It's not real near the big city or anything. It's in a pretty rural area. If I look for Beaver, Butler County, Iowa, because that's the other place. Yeah, okay. So it's still sending us to the general area of Butler County. There's Beaver Township there. Look at that. Somewhere in this area is where my ancestors' farm was. Okay, and my aunt, who is on the stream today, hi, has been in this area. So this is where a very, very cool thing happens, because we knew that my aunt's father, my grandfather, had been born in New Hartford, Iowa. We have that on some of his records, so this is the town. And we knew that Cora and Charlie were buried in this place called Oak Hill Cemetery in New Hartford. And so, at one time, my aunt, who lives in California, made a visit out to Iowa to see if we could learn anything more about the family. And she can tell us more about, I know you're the one who we learned that about the diphtheria epidemic and the likelihood that that's what Cora and Charlie died from, was a diphtheria epidemic. They died within a week of each other, and this just, breaks my heart. Oh my gosh, photograph of the farmhouse, amazing. Amazing stuff, right? So you can, oftentimes when you visit a location that your families have a connection to, you can go to a local library or the local town clerk's office and ask to see records or any local, sometimes there'll be a little local history book. I'm going to talk about that a couple of generations from now when we get back into Vermont. And so my aunt went to this cemetery and saw these memorials for Cora and Charlie, and I think you've given me, I looked, but I did not immediately find the snapshots, but I have them of that you sent me of having visited this cemetery. But she noticed a thing, and I am going to go ahead and say that the records were probably there and I probably missed them. The Iowa cemeteries are documented fairly well because, weirdly enough, during the Great Depression, y'all in America learned in social studies class in grade school that there were government programs to create jobs during the Great Depression. Some of those were called the Works Progress Administration, or the WPA. And weirdly, one of the projects that was a WPA funded project that created jobs in Iowa during the Depression was an Iowa cemetery grave inventory. And so they actually employed people during the Depression to go out and make a record of everybody who was buried in a cemetery in Iowa. And is a gravestone index that is a result of the research that was done. So if you happen to have ancestors that were buried in Iowa, if their graves were surviving during the Great Depression, then if they existed by then and survived by then, there is a decent chance that there's a record of them because the state of Iowa paid for this to be done. Amazing. So I suspect that the records for these other Hammonds probably were there, and I absolutely did not find them. It's also possible that they hadn't been indexed on Ancestry yet. I don't remember. But I sure as heck did not, and I had been looking for Hammond information for years and years and years because Honeywell, our dude, here, let's go back and find. So Honeywell had just been a persistent brick wall and super frustrating for me for years because I just couldn't find any leads on. There were no Vermont birth records. There were no useful Vermont census records. There was just nothing telling me who his parents might be. And we had this tantalizing clue that surely he is related to the family that married Elizabeth Honeywell. But again, how? So we go to scenic New Hartford, Iowa. We go to Oak Hill Cemetery. And remember that I pointed out that on Find a Grave, there's this super handy feature that over here on the right, and depending on the size of your browser, it moves around like they do. But on the right, we can go look at any other Hammonds who are buried in this cemetery, which I must just not have done. Because if I click on this, we get this very interesting thing. There are only 4 of them. And because the Iowa cemeteries are documented so well, I tend to believe that this is all of them, that are at least all of them whose grave markers are surviving. And we have Lewis Hammond. Okay, sure, fine. This is a fairly rural area in Iowa, so we don't have any reason to think there are very many Hammonds. So if there's anybody named Hammond in this part of Iowa, I find that interesting. And we say, okay, so there's Lewis, and then he's married to Mary. Fine. So her maiden name is probably not Hammond. This is probably a guy, though, that would be interesting to look at. And here's why I think he is super interesting. He is, Honeywell, my guy, it says was born about 1807. And Lewis Hammond is born about 1804, which puts them at a very similar age. And so now I'm thinking, oftentimes families didn't migrate all the way west all by themselves. So what if he's a cousin or somehow otherwise related to my Honeywell? What if they migrated together? They are similar in age. So what if let's just go and do a little thing and see if I can find any information about Lewis. Do I know any more about him or where he came from? And then might that lead me to records that would give me any more information about Honeywell? At this point, I don't know if he is a brother or a paternal cousin, or it's maybe a total coincidence and he's nothing. But I'm really intrigued by this guy, Lewis, and I want to go check him out. So what I'm going to do is, it's not super straightforward on Ancestry to just add an unrelated person to your tree. The add buttons are all connected to add them as a relative. So if you don't know how they're related yet, it's not obvious how to do that. But why don't we just start with something simple? I'm going to make another window in case we need to go back to Honeywell for some reason. So we've got Honeywell is here in a tab. And then I'm just going to go to the main search. And I'm going to plug in Lewis Hammond. And then I'm going to say he lived in New Hartford, Iowa at some point. And I'm going to say his birth year was 1804 because that's on his grave marker. Oh, and I could go ahead and even add his death year because that's also 1879. So we can go 1879 in Iowa. I don't know for sure that he died in Iowa or for sure that he died in New Hartford, but it seems more likely than not, right? Anyway, so we're going with that. I could also go add that he had a spouse, Mary. For the moment, I'll just try to remember it. I'll just remember it. Okay, so we got Lewis, got some basic information about him. Let's see what we get in terms of searches. Okay, so we get to find a grave record that we knew about. Here he is. That's the one we're already looking at. Nothing big there. We have, this is the Iowa U.S. cemetery records. These are the literal records that I was just describing that come from the Work Progress Administration. So this is the quality U.S. cemetery records. These are cool. Oh ho. Well now, here though is something very, very interesting. We have Lewis Hammond, who died in August of 1879. That matches what we had. This is from a U.S. Census, and it is an oddball thing that the U.S. Census took records of people who died, what is this, like within non-population census schedule. Let's go take a look. They did something where it was like people who died within a year before the census get recorded in a particular way. So we're in luck because he died in August of 1879 that he's recorded here. And in fact, are they saying that she did too? Persons who died. Oh, did she? Did Mary also? Yes, she sure did. Mary also died in 1879. There we go. So there's Lewis Hammond. You can kind of, the handwriting is a little sketch, but there it is. Lewis and Mary, and they're here. And I could go cross-check if the age for Mary matches what we had on the cemetery record. Looking pretty good. She was a good bit younger than Lewis. But look at what we're getting. Here's the thing that blows my mind about this record when we find it. So he's a farmer. He dies here. He's from Vermont. He's from Vermont. He was born in Vermont. Lewis was born in Vermont within a few years of Honeywell, who was born in Vermont, and they end up both being farmers in the same township in a part of Iowa that is not very populated, even to this day, is still not very densely populated. So I am really, 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 really liking this as a relative of Honeywell because it seems really plausible that they came out from Vermont as part of a family group. That seems super plausible. It is not proven, but it looks even better, right? So I said before when we were looking at our dude from Wikipedia that one of the things I look for is, do they come from similar locations? And then are they in the same places at about the same times? And that doesn't prove that they're related, but if you only found them, like with that musician guy, if we only found them in a collection of locations with no overlap, that starts to line up the evidence that they probably are not connected because they're just never near each other. These guys are near each other twice now. They live in the same place near as old men, and they come from the same place at about the same time when they're children. This is quite exciting. I still don't know how they're related, but if we look now at, so we've got now Lewis as born in Vermont, USA. And then we scroll down a little bit more, and we start to find census records, 1860. Here's Lewis and his wife, Mary A., right? And those two are living in Butler County, Iowa, which is where we find 1860. We also find Honeywell and Emily living in Butler County, Iowa at that time. We actually find that Lewis and Mary, okay, and the A stands for Anne, big surprise. Hey, Slacker Prophet, which one are you? Hi, cousin. So, Lewis and Marianne Hammond are living in here in 1856. So they are right about the time, right? Because we know that Honeywell, Emily, and Eugene migrate, and their family migrate from Pennsylvania, where they were in 1840, to, yes, to, wait, no, 1850, to Iowa, where they are in 1860. Good looking one. Yes, excellent. Excellent. Welcome. Welcome to the stream. So glad to have you. So we are finding out where all the Hammonds come from. And right now, we have made a little bit of a breakthrough on our fascinatingly named, this says paternal grandfather. This is our grandfather, Harry Hammond's grandfather. So he's our second great grandfather. Because you, first cousin, we're in the same generation. So this is a dude with the awesome name of Honeywell. I keep hoping that one of us cousins is going to bring this name back into the family. I could not convince my brother to name his son Honeywell. It did not go. But I just feel like some of these names should be brought back. We have some quality names throughout our family history. So Honeywell Hammond here, we're trying to figure out from records where this dude, we know he came from Vermont, but we don't know who his parents were. So we're trying to see if we can get any further back. And we have this clue because Auntie, so Auntie here has made a trip to Iowa and has found this record for another dude named Lewis Hammond, who came from Vermont and lived in Iowa at the same time as our Honeywell Hammond. And so we think that these two are connected. So what I want to see if I can do is I want to add Lewis. Can I add him to the tree? I can save him to someone in my tree, and I can add it to a new person. And this is the most straightforward way to create a record for somebody who is not related, or I don't know how it's related. Don't know how he's related. There. There. So he's born about 1804 in Vermont. And we'll go ahead and put in 1879 in Iowa. There. And in fact, I think we had from one of these other census records, we may have had the exactly when he died. I think we have from this one when he died, or the month that he died. So let's go ahead and now save this to Lewis. So we now have two records for him. There. August 1879 in Iowa. Born 1804 in Vermont. So now we have him in the tree, and this thing happens. This is where Ancestry is going to start offering us up some hints. So now we have Honeywell. Don't know where he came from. We have Lewis. We don't know where he came from either. And Lewis has this right here. To me, is a big deal. So we've got a couple of other records showing, like kind of linking him into Iowa. But this one right here is a birth record from Vermont. And it's a big, big, big deal because it lists who Lewis Hammond's parents were. Whoa. And those of you who were eagle-eyed viewers in the last time, yes. So, yes, cousin, we talked about that earlier on the stream, and I'm going to come back to that in just a minute because our thinking is that John Hammond, the record producer, doesn't look to be related to our Hammonds. But part of the reason that we're not 100% sure yet is that we haven't actually done the work to figure out where our Hammonds come from. We've gotten back to about 1800 in Vermont, and we poked around. There'll be a recording of this session, so you can actually go back and look at the beginning. We poked around a little bit on the family of John Hammond, the record producer, and his ancestors go back through New York City and Maryland. And ours go through Pennsylvania and Vermont. So far, if our families are connected, it's further back than that. But and the in all likelihood, they are probably not connected in the U.S. They may be connected back in England, but it doesn't look like we are the same Hammond family. They look like they're different. That one is a fancy Hammond family because they married into the Vanderbilts and a bunch of other stuff. And it looked like they had like a multi-generation Hammond musical family like we have, but different. So that was actually a super cool question, and I was really glad that you sent it. So Lewis Hammond is the son of a dude named, and I still do not exactly know how to pronounce this. Antipas is my best guess as to how to pronounce this guy's name. How do I know that this handwriting says Antipas? Last stream, we found two Hammond family genealogies in which there was a guy named Antipas listed. So, whoa, hey, hi Gibbs, welcome to the stream. Thanks for joining us. So, introduction, we're researching stuff about my family. I'm going to show you a lot of stuff about how I have done this research before, but I'm redoing it to show you all kind of how we solve these mysteries. If you have, thanks Ben for the referral. If you have questions about your family history or puzzles that you want us to solve, our goal eventually is to start doing more interactive research. So let me know as questions come out. I'm doing my best to keep an eye on the chat. I sometimes miss, and I'm doing my best. I'll catch up as we can. But at the moment, we are trying to connect back my Hammond family that goes back to 1807, born in Vermont. We may be able to find that out for you, Grant Gibbs. Let's see. We'll see what we can do. Okay, we're going to try to figure out where Honeywell Hammond, born 1807 in Vermont, came from. And we, on a previous stream, found a book. Let's go find the Hammond book. Genealogy of the Hammond family, that was filled with really cool names like Honeywell. But also that there was a dude named, okay, fine. This is the one on Ancestry. That's not the one I want. What I want is the free one. There we go. History and Genealogies of the Hammond Family in America. This is over on Wikitree. That's going to take me to this guy. And this is one of the two books we looked in last time. If we go search for Antipas, see if he's in this one. Oh, maybe he's not in this. Maybe he's in volume 2. All right. Or last stream, the search actually wasn't working initially, so it may also not be working. But we wanted to go see. Okay, now that we know that Lewis is a child, okay, fine. No, I know he's in there somewhere. Lewis is a child of Antipas Hammond and somebody named Beulah. So, okay. So remember at this point, Lewis is not connected to my family yet, right? We don't know how he's connected to my Honeywell Hammond, but we have this guy. We say, okay, so he's born not just 1804, but September. We got his date now, and we have a place in Vermont called Whitingham. So that's cool. We're going to save that. I'm actually going to do one more thing here that I often do when I'm adding people in and I don't yet know, is I'm just going to put a question mark on his name. There. It's not because I don't think that was his name. It's the question mark is a way of reminding me that I don't know for sure that this guy is actually in my family. So, well, okay, what's the ultimate goal? So the ultimate goal here is what I'm trying to find out is I've got this guy who I can document down from him to me. I know how he's related to me, but I do not know who his parents are. But what we found that was super tantalizing is this other guy who was born in the same place about the same time, moved to the same part of Iowa. If they're related to each other and I can figure out who Lewis is related to, I may be able to find out who Honeywell is related to. So we're trying to I want to build out a little bit more about Lewis to see if anything in Lewis's immediate family has any connection to Honeywell. And we already have the tantalizing clue that this group of Hammond families that we believe we are related to, that has that uses the given name Honeywell, that same family also uses the name Antipas. and they're unusual enough names that I feel pretty confident that those aren't going to be just anywhere. So we now have two things that are pointing us back to the family that is in this book. We just don't know how yet. I want to see if I can get this search to cooperate, because last time it came up working eventually. Okay, so not yet. But let's go ahead and add Lewis's father as Antipas Hammond. And then we're going to go Beulah, question mark. And we don't know what her maiden name was. We just have this to go on. And let's see if we learn anything else interesting. So we'll finish out the hints for Lewis. I'm kind of skipping over them because they are things we knew, right? So we knew this is the find a grave. We know that. Cemetery record. We know that. Census record here. We have him and his spouse, Mary Ann, here in Beaver Township. And so the fact that he's in Beaver Township is how we think this guy surely has some connection to Honeywell, because they live in the same place at about that time. So that's exciting. Now that we've done that, we can click up to Antipas and see if we're going to get anything. As of yet, we don't have any hints for Antipas. We haven't really entered a whole lot about him. We don't know very much. Go back to Lewis, and we could click through to Beulah and see if we have anything on Beulah. Even less likely to get anything for her because we don't even have a name for her. But what we found in a previous stream is that sometimes it takes a few minutes for Ancestry's index to catch up and give us hints. So sometimes I just kind of go away and come back. But the other thing I can do if I don't want to wait is I want to go do a quick search on Antipas. Well. Now here, what we have is actually notice that we have two guys. If you look at these two records, I'm going to skip this one in the middle for a minute, but we're going to come back to it. This one seems very clear to be the same guy, right? Because we now have an Antipas Hammond marrying a Beulah. Her last name is Blodgett, and it's in Whitingham, Vermont. Now, at this point, I might be curious about where Whitingham, Vermont. I want to know, is Whitingham, Vermont big? Now, it's in Vermont, so the answer is no. Nothing in Vermont is big. But how likely is it that there's lots and lots and lots of Hammonds and multiple people named Antipas in Whitingham, Vermont? I will tell you the answer to that. It's very small. It's even still small today. So the likelihood that there are there may be a cluster of Hammond family there. There may be a lot of cousins, but there's not a huge population where there's likely to be a lot of people with the same name. So here we are. Whitingham is near the Massachusetts border. It's fairly rural, as a lot of things in Vermont are. Look at it's very beautiful in the fall. The leaves turn, etc. It's actually pretty close to where I went to college. So we now know that we have Antipas and Beulah. It seems really likely that these are Lewis's parents, because they're married at the right time. They're married in 1801. He's born there in the same town in 1804. And is it very likely that there are two people named Antipas Hammond and they both married somebody named Beulah? I vote no. I think this is the parents. Therefore, I think we can go ahead and connect this record, and that is going to give us Beulah's name. Okay, so it's not going to connect it correctly, so we'll have to go through and do that. Okay, well, that is fine. So now what we'll do is we'll go connect this record to, can we do that? Nope, we can't. Okay, fine. Oftentimes it will connect to both people, but here what we have to do is edit the marriage, select that Beulah's the spouse. Now what will happen if we go over to Beulah's profile is it'll show up for her as a marriage. We're not seeing that source yet. I would like to get that source in here. And I might want to do that before I forget. But the other thing I want to do before we forget is to go ahead and and I'm going to go ahead and give her, this is more the traditional spelling of Beulah, even though it was one way in one record and one way in another record. I'm going to go ahead and give her that spelling. The decisions we have to make about spelling when you get back into handwritten records and variations, it can be tricky. I do try, if I see a lot more records where it's spelled with just the U, I'll go change it back. But right now I'm guessing that she's using the standard name. It's going to take a second for this page to update. Right, Ancestry? Take a second. Okay, fine. I'll refresh the page. There it is. Okay, so here she is. But now let's go look at so there's a couple of super interesting things. I'm going to quickly see if this search is any more cooperative than it was. Nope, it's not. Let's see if it's in here. Because he's in there. Nope, okay. Okay. We now have hints showing up for Antipas because we connected him. So now Ancestry knows, oh, you mean this one, right? Because before we had no dates, no locations, just a name. Admittedly, a fairly unusual name. But now it says, oh, well, if you've connected him to this record, if you, the researcher, Ancestry says to me, hey, if you think that this is the same guy, we got a bunch of other records that people thought were the same guy. Let's offer them to you. So connecting him to just the one source opens up a whole bunch of new hints. Oh, look, here's one of the Hammond books. So I'm intentionally not looking at the Hammond book on Ancestry because that book, if you go to Ancestry and you're not a member, it's behind a paywall and it's not one of their free records. But that book is out of copyright, so you can just go get it on other free sources. So if I go to archive.org or just search for it on Google, you can actually buy reprints of it. You don't need to buy it. It's free. It's free. It's in Google Books, which is free. And here it is. It's in archive.org. Okay. So this is the second one. There are two of them. Let's see if this book wants to tell us about Antipas. Because there was an interesting thing that I saw when we did the search, and I really want this book to tell me it easily. And if it doesn't, I'm just gonna yell at it. There it is. Okay. This guy, Antipas Hammond of Rochester, Mass. This guy. Well, we've been here before. We looked at him on Wednesday. That's how we knew that somebody had the name Antipas. But here's our problem. Here we have a problem. This guy was married in 1736 to Abigail Swift, which means he wasn't married in 1801 to Beulah Blodgett. And could he have remarried? Yeah, but not this dude, right? He's way too old to be our guy. He would have been 90 or 100 and like, yeah, go get it, old men, but no. And in fact, this Antipas had a son, Honeywell. That was where we talked about the Honeywells before. And this Honeywell was not born in 1807 like ours was. He's born in 1740, died in 1807, way too old to be our guy. However, as we saw, there were 3 or 4 other Honeywells in this family. So, okay, great. How many more Antipasses were there? That's the question, right? So we've got this guy. Here he is on this page 320. This is him in the index. So is there a second guy named Antipas anywhere in this book? That's what we want to try to find out. Well, it looks like this book thinks there is not. It looks like this book thinks it's only that one guy. But let's go back and see, because it does show up. Yep. This is just him listed with his father. See, so this Antipas guy was born in 1704. He is way too old to be marrying and having children in 1801 and 1804. It's not happening. So this is not our guy. This is a family member of our guy. And this guy, yep. Right, and then this is just the table of contents. So this Hammond book has one Antipas, but we now know that there's another one. We think, right? It's almost certain that there's another one. And is it likely that he's in a completely unrelated family? He's never heard of this family? Not very likely. I think it's pretty likely that these are the same family. But again, we're the same place we were at before, which is, yeah, okay, he's related. We don't know how. Super frustrating. But dun, 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 we got a hint for this guy. We're still playing around in a family that we don't even know is related to me. But we do have this interesting fact of Antipas here with his parents. And now I have kind of a decision to make, which is how much time do I want to put into this guy when I don't know yet how he's related to me or if he's related to me? Do I want to spend a lot of time building out his tree when if there's 2 Antipas Hammonds, there could be 3? There could be a whole other, right? And Lewis might be, I still don't actually know if Lewis is Honeywell's brother or if he is a cousin. So Antipas may, even if he is interesting and in the family, he may only be Honeywell's uncle. Well, okay, so then that does point to maybe I want to go figure out who Antipas's siblings were and did they have any children, right? Because we looked previously for a birth record for Honeywell in Vermont and we didn't find one. So, but here is the thing. I'm just going to go ahead and like skip ahead years because that is a place I found myself probably 6 or 7 years ago when I was doing this research. And new records came online over the course of time that did a very miraculous thing, which is this. If we go look at the New York wills and probates, they existed in these books. You could go to New York, but you would have had to know where to go look. And I had no idea that we had a connection to New York. But if we go here, check this out. I'll show you what we are looking at here. We have, okay, let me see if this, I don't know if this is going to give us everything or if I'm going to have to do some more digging. But I know what's here, so I'm going to just take us to it. And not torment us so much. We know now that Beulah and Antipas are the parents of Lewis. And we know that we're going to go ahead and go with anybody who's named Antipas Hammond and is married to a Beulah. Oh, and look, it's that other spelling, right? Anybody who has that, we're going to assume that those are Lewis's parents because I just don't think that combination of names is going to be very common or happen someplace else. Great. So we now know that Antipas died in the town of Batavia, New York, and this thing is dated in 1814. Yes. So 21st day of May, it says down here, in 1814. That's not Lewis's date of Antipas's date of death. That is his date of this certificate being issued. And his wife is being named as the administratrix of his estate. So we know that he has recently died. So he died before the 21st of May, but we don't know exactly when. But that's fine. We'll go ahead and say that he died in 1814. So we'll attach, let me see if we turn the page now. Do we get anything else? That's the same. Is there anything else? Nope. Only that page right now. So that only takes us to 1814 and that he died. But now we didn't realize that his family was in Genesee County, New York, which is in upstate, somewhat western New York. So at least now we know. We've got Antipas and Beulah who had at least Lewis in Whitingham, Vermont. And now they have moved to Genesee, New York in 1814. Lewis is only 10 years old at this point, right? So this is a young family. We don't yet know when Antipas was born, but he can't be that old because he only got married in 1801. He's only been married 15 years. Not that old. So we're going to go ahead and attach this to Antipas. We have his death being about 1814 in New York. It said that he was late of Batavia, New York. So we're going to go ahead and say that he died in Batavia. And then his probate record is in Genesee County, New York. There. So now we know this more thing about him. And, all right, so the rest of that has not come up, but I'm going to go, and I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to go look in my other window and see where I put those records. Because if we dig around in the probate books of the state of New York in that spot, we're going to find more stuff about Antipas, and that is going to give us answers. So I just want to do a quick reminder, do I need to use Ancestry for this, or can I go to Family Search? Because if I can do it on Family Search, then that's what I'm going to want to do. Okay. Ding, 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 ding. And where are they? They are in... Aha. Aha. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to just bring over this link. We're still using these ostensibly free trial records on Ancestry. And so this is one of those where I'm trying to make it so that we can easily do research whether you pay for a full Ancestry membership or not. So right now we're still taking advantage of the free trial. Not my favorite thing. This tab is gonna shut off in about a month, and I'm gonna be hating life is what's gonna happen as we try to figure out how to do it without all my tools. But okay, yes, check this out. Okay, this requires a leap of faith with handwriting, so go with me here. But check this thing out. We have Hammond here. And what we're looking at is an index to something called a guardianship record. So Antipas Hammond dies with minor children still living. We know he has at least one because we know Lewis is only 10 years old. And so the courts in Genesee County, New York, where he dies, have to make a record of what happened, where his children are going to go, especially because as a widow, their mother Beulah may not be able to take care of them. She may not have a source of income. If there's running a farm to be done, she may not be able to run the farm, or might not have enough money to hire help to run the farm if the children are not old enough, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's some kind, and sometimes they do formal legal guardianship of the children, even if it is to their birth mother. And I don't know why. There must be legal reasons about the status of the widows at that point. But check this crazy thing out. If you look here, we have Hammond, and that says Lewis. So that is a record of Lewis. But look what it says after Lewis. It says Honeywell. Hunni, sure, fine, Well. Honeywell is the second child surviving of Antipas and Beulah. Holy cow. There it is. It's a guardianship record that names all of the children. We now also know that there are two more children. There's an Abigail and an Alonzo. And if you look up above, there is also a Sophronia, which is an awesome name, by the way. This family, and they're completely awesome names. And so now we know that they are on page 126 and 127 of a probate record book. I am curious, so I think what I want to do is I want to actually go to Family Search and see if they have. I want to see if they have this. Can I look at their records without creating an account? Heck with it. Let's create an account. Oh, hang on. Pull that tab. Okay, good. I'm going to do this in another tab. Just never you mind what my personal information is. Good. Excellent. It's not a fake account. Nah, I'll just do it because if I create a real one, I can use it. Right? I can use it next time. We're going to be back here like a whole bunch. So, and of course I have an account under my other name. I am curious to know, have I done anything on that account? There we go. Oh, and when you create an account, oh, never mind. Okay, fine. Never mind. I'm going to sign in under my real account. It'll be fine. When you create an account, interestingly enough, it asks you whether you are a member of the LDS Church. And since I'm not, I've never had that come up. I don't know if that means you get more stuff. No. Okay. I'll go ahead and get logged in here. I'll just use my regular account because it's free. Okay, so here's Family Search. Let me bring that tab back up here. Here we are. I am really becoming a big fan of Family Search, especially as they have added so many new cool features. And one of the things that I really love doing over on Family Search is they have a lot of resources. If you want to volunteer to help index records that are currently handwritten and make them more searchable for other people that are looking for your family, you can do. They have all these cool, simple web-based things. You go in, you do like 2 or 3 at a time, and then you go do something else. It is a lovely way to pass the time if you're just like watching TV or whatever. So it is absolutely delightful. And they have massively expanded their ability to create family trees. So they are creating something that is similar to the WikiTree family tree in that it's going to be a giant shared tree, and there's opportunity if you've already added a person and somebody else has added the same person, you can merge the records and share what you know. So there's some really good stuff here. What I want to do is go to, I forget whether I could just go straight to catalog, but I'm going to try. Nope, that did not work. Okay, what I want to do is go to their search, records, catalog. This guy, the catalog is like it's on my speed dial now because Ancestry is catching up in terms of what they've indexed and what they've put online, and as we've discussed, all of that is behind a paywall. But Family Search has a lot of these records, they're just not indexed. Some of them are and are searchable. A lot of them are not. Why don't we go ahead and actually just do a record search for Antipas first, because I might be making this harder than I need to. Okay, Antipas Hammond. We don't know his birth, but we do know his death is in Batavia. And his death year range is 1814. If we look for this, let's see what we get. That's not super helpful. Restrict records by location. United States. State New York. I don't love, part of why I ended up over on Ancestry for so long was that I don't love the way this search works. It just seems unnecessarily difficult. Okay, fine. So we're not going to get it the easy way. The thing I'm looking for has not been indexed. But what I want to do is go to ye catalog, and I'm going to look for Batavia, New York. New York. So there it is. And I'm going to look for any availability of records, and it's just going to show me what they've got, which in this case is quite a lot. And where do I want to be? I want to be burials in Batavia Cemetery might be interesting, but because I'm looking for a specific probate, land ledgers, that's also going to be interesting. Vital records was just burials. Okay. Public records. I don't know. Is that what I want? Oh, wait. No. I want Genesee County because I want Genesee County probates. Sorry. One of those things to know. If they're in a town, the individual town might not be where the courthouse is. And so what I want is the Genesee County Courthouse, which apparently wasn't in the village of Batavia. It was in the county. So I clicked up to go to the county. Now, probate records, that's what I want. I want a probate record. And what I would specifically like is to see if I can find the guardianship record. And I actually don't remember off the top of my head which one of these, but we can go by some dates. It's not this one because that's too late, 1856. We need a date that is in 1814. So it can't be this one. It can't be this one. It could be this one. There might be a will, and there might be a surrogate's records and orders. Guardianship. Oh, I didn't look for guardianship here. Nope, it's not up here. Okay. Guardianship records could be in any of these. There's probably a way to know. Okay. Oh, look. Haha. Letters of guardianship. Okay. Now let's click back to, this is Letters of Guardianship, Volumes 1 and 2. This is what we found on Ancestry. Letters of Guardianship, Volumes 1 and 2, 1810 to 1871. Letters of Guardianship, Volume 1 and 2, 1810. Oh, looky. All Ancestry has done is added a little bit of indexing on the top of a record they actually got from the Family History Library. Ooh, and good news, this record is browsable online. That's what this little camera means. So that's very cool. That means we can go look at it. So let's go do that. We're going to go look at the index. What page of the index we found? We'll just go make sure. So this is on the 7th image. Page 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is it this one? That's M. We went too far. We went to 8. We want record number 7. Here we are. See how we're looking at the same image? This stuff was all digitized by people before Ancestry even existed. So Family Search has this, and this is free because we're looking at this on a free account. So I feel really good about what we're able to do here. We can just go look at what they've got. And same thing, we've got Sophronia, Lewis, Honeywell, Abigail, and Alonzo as the children, potentially, we think. We're going to we got to go look at that record. But on pages 126 and 127 of this book. So now this is what looking at an index is going to tell us. So what we can do on Family Search that is actually pretty cool is, you saw here, we've got this zoomed out view. This is all the pages in that book. So we're just going to scroll up until we find something that might be the numbers of the physical book may be off from the image numbers, but we want to get to 126 and 127 and see if that gives us what we want. This is 127. Let's zoom in. And here, the physical book, that's page 110. So we'll go back up to the main. We'll just keep scrolling down until we zero in on 126 and 127. 129. Go back. 128, sure enough. Here's 120. Hey, look at that. Okay. All right, here we are. 126. Yes. Okay. So we now know legally chosen and allowed guardian of Sophronia Hammond. She goes to John Hadley Jr. Well, now, at the moment, we don't actually know for 100% sure. We've not seen Sophronia Hammond before. We don't know anything about her. And does it say why? No. Does it say that she was a child of that family? No. And this is 1821, I think is what that says. So I don't love I'm not thrilled about this record. Let's try the other one. Because this is the one that was the big news anyway, right? Okay. So let's just confirm that we're in the place we think we are. Guardian of Lewis Hammond, Honeywell Hammond, Abigail Hammond, and Alonzo Hammond. These 4 children. So what this is telling us is that Lewis and Honeywell are almost certainly brothers, right? And let's make sure down here on the, let's check the date. 1821. Okay, that's a lot later than 1814, so that's interesting. And it doesn't say, we wish it would say who they were the children of, but let's look at the other really exciting thing on this page that I feel pretty good about, and that is, who are they being given in guardianship to? You will recall back when we were looking at the ancestry of our guy Lewis, that his parents were Antipas Hammond and Beulah Blodgett. And these children are being given in guardianship to the custody of a dude named Luther Blodgett. That is pretty big to me. That seems pretty likely that Luther Blodgett is a relative of their mother's family. Right? That's just so many nice coincidences lining up that I feel pretty good about. We know we have Lewis. We know Lewis exists. Right? We know that it doesn't say his age here, but it did say that it does have him in the same county where Antipas died, and Beulah became his administrator. And so, what I'm going to hazard a guess here, because we also said, golly, why would Antipas's children need a guardian if their mother was still living? But what it makes me wonder about is, what if, because this is 1821, so Lewis is born in 1804, he's still in about 15, so he's still underage. Honeywell's born 1807, so he's 13, 14, right? They're still underage. And then they're usually listed in age order, so I would assume that Abigail and Alonzo are even younger. And what if their mother died in 1820-ish, in 1821? They would definitely need new guardians then. So with the connection between, we know who Lewis's parents were because we found an honest-to-goodness birth record. And we now know that Lewis and Honeywell were almost certainly brothers because they're in the same guardianship record with two other siblings after the death of their father, who was Antipas. We know that Antipas died in this part of New York, and we know that that's the same guy from Whitingham, Vermont to Genesee County, New York, because he has the same wife, Beulah, right? So we now know Lewis is connected to Honeywell because of Iowa and then Vermont. Lewis is born in Vermont to these parents. These parents, the two of them together, are in Genesee County, New York, and die. And now here we find in Genesee County, New York, Lewis with Honeywell. Boom. So now we have every reason to think that Honeywell is a son of this family. Whoa! And all of that, we'll go all the way back. All of that is because Auntie went to Iowa and spotted Lewis and his wife buried in a cemetery in a super rural area where they were the only other Hammonds in the whole cemetery where Honeywell's family lived, in the village where Honeywell's family lived. So we have done a ton of really puzzly chaining all these folks together to be able to get this information. I don't remember where I first found the record for Antipas's death in New York. I will talk a little bit about the fact that so Auntie made a trip to New Hartford, Iowa, because that was where we had her father being born. She found those cemetery records. I showed you the town of Whitingham, Vermont. I made a trip a couple years ago because I mentioned I went to college near this area. And I happened to be back at the college for an alum event, and I happened to have a couple of days off where I didn't need to be there for anything in particular. And I did, in fact, drive up to Whitingham. It's only a couple hours away from my college. And I went to two places in Whitingham. Town clerk's office, which was open, and they had record books that I looked in and found stuff about Hammonds. And I went to the village library. I forget if it was in the town of Whitingham or if it was nearby. But in this county, there was a library. I'm going to see if I can find it. Oh, wait. And here's the thing that's interesting. There was a local historian who wrote a little history of the town of Whitingham, Vermont. And I think there were actually more than one. And one of them's online, but there was a little book that they had in the local library because it had been written by a local author and it wasn't published by anybody fancy, and I hadn't found it online. But I was able to go into the local library and ask the librarian, hey, do you have any local history information? And they said, here's our shelf. And I think it was 2 or 3 little tiny books. And they had information that some local person had written about the families who lived in Whitingham, Vermont. And this is the one that's available online. I kind of want to see if there's any Hammonds in here. I don't remember whether there are. Boom! Yes, there's a Hammond. So there's a little tiny bit about a Joseph Hammond. We don't know yet if that's connected to us. And there are other members of the, right, because the Blodgetts are here, and there's actually Shumways that are in this town as well. And Honeywell Hammond married an Emily Shumway. So there are Shumways all over the town of Whitingham, and they're in this book. And so I started to think, okay, well, yeah, my family's definitely got a connection to this area. And it happened too. I'm out there chilling in my rental car and driving around, and I was able to really look at the area, drive through and look at some of the little farms. It's very hilly. Vermont is known for being really mountainous. And to look at some of those little farms that are tucked away in these hills and with these forests, and to be like, one of those might have been my ancestors. And at a bare minimum, my ancestors' stuff would have looked like this, right? I don't know which one it is, but I do know what this area looks like. It was really, really cool to be connected to that. As I mentioned, the town clerk did actually have record books, and there was something really interesting about the Whitingham record book. I wonder if Family Search has that. I'm going to go look. Okay, so we now have this record that we know is connected to Lewis and Honeywell. What I might do in my research here is that I might, because I have my trees being stored over on Ancestry, this is a Family Search record, I might want to grab a download of this image and attach it over on the other one, right, over on their tree. But one quick thing I wanted to look at is one more record search. I want to see if I can find Antipas Hammond in Whitingham. Any record at all in Whitingham. Let's see what we get. But the reason I'm doing that is because there's a record I know exists. So, okay, yeah, if we look here, we have the one we already saw, which was the record for Beulah. And then we have another one. Remember that we saw the guardianship record in 1821 for Sophronia? Turns out, yes, she is a child of Antipas and Beulah. Her birth record is there. We have the marriage record here, but we do not have a birth record for Honeywell still. If we go look at this, set of images, browse the film. This is what I want to try to see if this is the record. It is not. Okay. We've seen a couple of records from Vermont that are on these little index cards. And so this is an indexing project that I don't know why it was done in the state of Vermont, but it's very common to find these vital records that have been indexed in this standard format on these little cards. You can actually see where the hole was drilled at the bottom. I would imagine that was an actual card catalog with drawers, probably. Kind of cool. There is a book, though, that I'm going to look for. Whitingham. Because Whitingham, it turns out, and I was able to see this when I was at the town clerk's office, their town record book is funny. It's this guy. Yep, it's available online. Images. I want to go look at this guy. It's a lot, but I want to go to, okay, Windham County, Whitingham Village, births. Nope, these are too late. Births and deaths. Maybe it's there. That's probably it. Births, marriage, and deaths. This guy. It's going to be this. Might be this one. Might be this one. The way I found that the way their records were stored was funky. That's a technical term. And specifically, what they had was these clusters of families. Yep, that's what we have. Rosemary Wheeler, and not in any kind of particular order, but if you page all the way through this thing, they recorded their town's births in family groups. So in some places, like if you go to a church record, you're going to see all the baptisms that happened on a particular day, and you'll see them by date, and then you'll go to the next date and you'll see a bunch more. And so that means that they come along, however, whatever order the children were born in, regardless of family, is the way I'm accustomed to seeing them. The record in this, there's an index. That's what I want. The record here was actually by family group. And so what they did was that they had a section. Is it in here? No. Okay. So this is not the book I want. let's go back to Whitingham. They had a section of the book that is just all of the Hammond's children. And then there's another page somewhere else that's all of somebody else's children and so forth. And so that actually made it a little bit harder to find because I couldn't go in chronological order. But once I found any Hammonds, I found all of them. And everything in here is in, sadly, kind of no particular order. So there was a bunch of digging that I had to do, but what I found was that there was a record for the births of Louis and Sophronia, and I want to say one other child from that family, but not the other ones. And I've made up a story about this. I have made up a story about how I think this happened, because, and it helped that I'd actually physically been in this area in Whitingham, so I've driven around on some of these roads, and I said I have this feeling. Oh, here's the other thing that I learned, though. I learned a thing from reading the little history books of Whitingham. So Whitingham, as we saw on the map, it exists in this along the border with Massachusetts, but it's also very close to the border of upstate New York. And at the time, and I learned this because I read this little history book that was in the library in Whitingham. At the time that Whitingham was founded, they didn't build their own church because they were founded by people who had come from a variety of places and were members of churches elsewhere that were different denominations. And they didn't have a compatible one set of religious guidelines that this one town wanted to all follow. Everybody kind of wanted to do their own church thing. And so what they decided in the town of Whitingham is that rather than build their own town church and try to fight amongst each other about who should follow what rules, everybody just went to the church of their liking in a neighboring town, which was, I guess, good for religious harmony in the town of Whitingham, but it was really bad for family records, because normally you would have churches recording the baptisms of the children in the town, but they didn't. And I don't know whether my family was in one of those other churches or if they were just sort of godless and it's a long trip and they didn't bother. No idea. But because of that, they didn't have a centralized church record that said all the children that were born and all the baptisms. And so I have this story in my head along with that says, like, the town clerk is recording these groupings of these family births. And what I envision, I swear, is that, like, Antipas and Beulah are out there farming and they're working hard and the land is rugged, and they every once in a while they go into town to buy supplies or sell their crops or whatever it is that they do. And when they think to do so, they might stop by the town clerk's office and say, oh, hey, you can update with the list of our children that were born out on the farm, right? Because they weren't coming in to be born in a central hospital with birth certificates like we do now. They were giving birth at home. So what I suspect is that they would record the births of their children if and when it occurred to them to do so. And doing so was probably kind of a pain. And so we have a record in New York of Antipas and Beulah having more children than the town clerk recorded. I'll try to find a copy of that. I don't want to waste all the remaining minutes on the stream looking for that one page, but I did find the page where their children are listed, and it only lists 2 or 3 of them, even though we know that they had at least 5. Because we have the 4 who were living, the 4 who were were given in guardianship to Luther Blodgett, and the other one who was given in guardianship to a different guardian. So we know they had 5 children by the time they got to New York. Of course, it is possible that those younger children may have been born along the trip or somewhere in Western New York after they migrated too, and we don't have those records. But in any case, we just don't have, and it most likely does not exist, a written birth record for Honeywell Hammond. We just don't. We don't have it. He was almost certainly, yes, you do hear Pasha. Hello, Pasha. We hear you. That's the dog. He thinks I've been on stream long enough, and we need to explain to him that I have 10 more minutes. He's super bored. He is not as fascinated by genealogy as all of you. So we do not have a birth record for Honeywell. And my message there is, I've been to Whitingham. I am confident that he was born in Whitingham. And I am fairly confident that a written birth record for Honeywell does not exist. So pretty sure there just isn't one. But we have enough circumstantial evidence for the rest of the family that I am also confident that Honeywell is a son of Antipas Hammond and Beulah Blodgett. So with that, very exciting. We're going to do a few exciting things before we wrap up the stream. And this is a great time to invite you all to how you feeling about this? What questions come up? Is this helping any of you think about how you might want to research your families? We are going to take the question marks off of this guy. And we are going to take the question marks off of Beulah. Oh, you know what else? In that probate record, it was spelled without the E. It was just spelled with the U. And that was a record taken during her adult life, and she would have told them how it was spelled. So I think she spelled it that way. The marriage record had it with the E. The probate record had it without. The birth records had it without. So, and then we have Lewis. His birth record said L-U-I-S, except I think that was handwriting. I don't think that was actually how he spelled it. All right, so we have these. We're taking the question marks off because this is our family. And we are going to add Honeywell as a child of this family. All right. Hype in the chat. Hype in the chat. All right. Oh, wait. And we're going to do, it wants us to type him in again. We don't need to do that. He's already in this tree. So we're going to go here. We're going to say select someone in your tree. And we're going to search Honeywell. At the moment, we only have the one in the tree. Thank you, Cranky. Hype. Yes. Hype in the chat. Woo. We have found new parents. New parents. So we now have parents and a brother and another brother and two sisters, right? Because we also have Sophronia, Abigail, and Alonzo. And the reason we like to research the siblings is because sometimes the siblings, as we have seen twice now on this stream, as we have seen, sometimes the siblings have records about their parents that our ancestor doesn't have. And so Lewis was the guy who opened up the whole world of who these parents are. And that's going to allow us to then do a whole bunch more research on, we still have not connected this Antipas back to the Hammond family that is in the book. So we have one step closer. We have yet more evidence because we now have two unusual names that are found in that Hammond book, or those two Hammond books. We have that, but we don't yet know exactly how he is descended. So we don't know who Antipas's father is. And then we also have a new member of the family, Beulah Blodgett, who is going to allow, that's going to enable us to research, as we did with Emily Shumway here. We got a bunch of research on the Shumway family. We will be able to research a bunch potentially on the Blodgett family. Eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed the title go by, as I was zooming through lots of things, of a Blodgett family book, which does exist. So, super exciting. We're going to be able to do a ton more on that line of Hammonds. So, to circle back to my good-looking cousin and his question about John Hammond, the jazz musician, now that we are pretty confident that our Hammonds are linked to a Hammond family that goes back to New England and specifically goes back to Rochester, Massachusetts, it is, and we've accounted for our Hammonds in 1800 are in Vermont, upstate New York. Their families likely came from that area around Rochester, Massachusetts. Prior to that, the family of John Hammond, the jazz musician, he came from a family that was in Maryland at that time. And so in all likelihood, the families in the United States are not connected to each other, most likely, unless we find that somebody migrated from Massachusetts down to Maryland, but that didn't typically happen. So that would be, it's not impossible, it's just unusual. So most likely, that's a Hammond family from back in England who came over separately and ended up in Maryland. And we may still be related to them back in England, but we won't know unless we can get there, unless we can get this line back to England, which we can't. So that is the stream for today. I did say in the description that we were going to do city directories, and we totally did not do that. The city directories are a fun resource that I might want to try to snag before we lose them, because Ancestry has them indexed pretty well. And we won't be able to use those after our free trial expires. So we may take a look at those on either Wednesday or next Sunday on the scheduled streams. If there's stuff you want to see, if there's branches of this tree that I've lost track of that I didn't finish, you want me to look at, or as you are starting to come up with your questions. So Gibbs, you got a question about your grandmother. I'm just, I'm being very sensitive about not showing living people's information on the stream, because that's potentially a violation of Twitch's terms of service, and we don't want to do that. But there may be, if we're dealing with living people, we may be able to chat offline about getting that information and getting us back to a deceased ancestor. But we can also just generally chat offline. So all of this is stuff that I currently do for free because I find it fun. I have researched the heck out of my own tree and several other friends and family members, and I've kind of built them out as far as they're all going to go. So we have tons of stuff. If you like just letting me talk at you about methods in a tree that you aren't connected to and don't care about, happy to do it. I've got lots more material that we can cover. But as we grow the stream, I'm hoping that you'll bring me your questions, and we may even be able to go do a quick search live on any one of these free services, right? WikiTree, Family Search, Ancestry, any of the other services. See if we can get some of your questions answered. Or figure out that there's a new research project that needs to be done, and we can help you do it. So with that, it's about that time. I'm going to wrap up the stream for today. I want to super duper thank all of you for joining. It was really cool to see the viewer count be pretty good. I'm not intentionally going for Twitch affiliate status, but I am kind of watching that dashboard out of the corner of my eye. If I do become a Twitch affiliate, it opens up a little bit more features that you all can use to interact in the stream. And I don't know if it makes you watch ads or not or whatever. Like I'm mostly just in it for the fun for right now. But if you do keep coming back and supporting the stream and telling your friends and sharing with people who may have questions about their families, and we grow it, the more we grow, the more we may be able to do more stuff to make it more interesting and useful for you. So we'll see if that happens. If we don't grow the channel and we just keep it kind of small and chill and lots of personal attention, and you all want to keep coming back for that, that's cool too. I'm having fun. So thanks again for joining, and I will be scheduled back on Wednesday. Don't forget to follow and turn on your notifications if you want to be notified when I go live. I keep threatening to do surprise unscheduled streams, and I haven't done it yet, but you'll at least be notified on the scheduled Wednesday and scheduled Sundays. Last week I did an experiment moving that Wednesday time a little earlier to see if more people would watch, and I learned two things. One, more people did not watch, and two, I like it better at the earlier time, so I'm keeping it. So I'm going to be streaming at 3 p.m. Pacific. That's whatever time that is. What is that? 6 p.m. 6 p.m. Eastern, because I can do math in my head. So that'll be the usual Wednesday time. And then this here time, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, is the usual time for Sundays. I'm going to keep up that schedule until I get tired of it. So, and hopefully you all will keep coming back and having good discussion. So thank you. Thank you, folks, for hyping in the chat. Thanks for telling your friends. And I will see you next time.